Hello and welcome to a Cuppa with So Timeless. Today I am busy trying to finally get back to finishing off my daughter's pyjamas that I started making for her a number of months ago now really, and just have never really got around to finishing. She's back from uni next week, and after a very long couple of months of not seeing her, so we're all very excited that she'll be back. I thought I'd try and see if I can get the pyjamas finished in time for her visit with us. It is supposedly going into spring soon. We'll see what the weather does. But these pyjamas, although the winter style, long pants, long sleeves, the flannel fabric is fairly light, and so she'll be able to still wear them during the spring months as well. And she loves pyjamas. I've made her a different pair in a pink check pattern, which she absolutely loves and wears all the time. So just to show you, she, other than pink, which is one of her favourite things, she likes cutesy things. So I have this very cute fabric that I'm making these pyjamas out of. Like I said, it's a flannel type fabric, but it's a thinner one, so it's not a very thick one. Her other pyjamas are much thicker, warmer pyjamas. So these are more for that in between times. So I have actually made a start on these. I cut them out, gosh, probably about 4 months ago now. I cut them out, but I've made a start. I've sewn the pockets in. I've got the pockets in place on the front panels of the pants, so the hidden type pockets that you slide your hands into. I've got it pinned down there at the moment for attaching all the other bits. What I'm going to do next is attach the front band onto the front part so that I can start putting the pants together. I've also already prepared the piping for the legs, and I was going to try and do piping around the pockets this time. I didn't do that on the last pair, but I didn't quite have enough of the satin bias binding, and when I started making these I thought I was going to finish them at the time and didn't have time to order or go out and get any more. But anyway, they'll still look good. And the back part of the pants are pretty much ready to go. They've got the yoke already sewn in place, so they're ready to attach to the front, and then we can start getting the cuffs and the piping with the piping on. So just have a little chat to you while I continue with these. I'm hoping you can hear me okay, because I don't yet have a mic. I was hoping it was going to arrive before I filmed today. It hasn't got here yet, so I'm hoping you can hear me. I'll try and speak up so you can hear me over the sound of the sewing machine, and yeah, so that I don't get drowned out. So while I'm chatting to you, I'm just going to pin this into place. This sort of thing, I talked in a video before about not tacking things in place. This sort of thing I wouldn't really tack into place because it's a straightforward seam, so pinning is enough just to hold it in place and make sure that it's going to be in the right position. And I just need a couple of pins just to mark where it needs to start from and keep it in the right place while I'm sewing. I'm putting the pins fairly low down, lower than the seam would be, because I don't want to sew over the pins, but I don't necessarily want to be taking the pins out the whole time as I'm working. So just pin that in on there. And then maybe do one in the center to match up the center pieces. Then I know that it's all going to be lying in the right place. I can of course pull the pins out as I sew. I'll see how it goes as I'm going. Sometimes you get so engrossed in the sewing you forget to pull the pins out, and I've had a needle break off and shoot at me luckily I was wearing my glasses at the time, so it didn't get me in the eye, but that can happen, so you have to be careful. I just wanted to really give a bit of a better idea of what my sort of aims are with this channel, what I'm hoping to achieve. I started talking a bit about it in my introductory video, and might not have been completely clear. Just checking my settings that I've got everything set correctly. I've done that before, start sewing and then realise I've got the wrong stitch set. Basically, what I'm hoping to achieve and do is talk about the history of various sewing and fashion bits. I'm not an expert on fashion by any means, and that's not my goal or aim, is to talk about fashion trends or anything like that. I love vintage sewing, sewing vintage clothes. I do sew a few vintage pieces for myself as well. I sew mostly vintage pieces for, a lot of vintage pieces for other people. I sew for my daughter vintage pieces because she loves wearing them. And I do made to order for customers. And I have a little Etsy store where I list my vintage pieces as well to sew. So my aim with the videos are to show pieces that I'm making, maybe for my Etsy store or a special order that someone's put in, a special request for myself. These pajamas are for my daughter, as I said. I don't currently have any pajamas on my Etsy store to sell, but it's something that I'll consider putting on in the future. And if anybody was interested and wanted me to make some, they're welcome to message me at any time, either via YouTube or my Instagram or on my Etsy store, and just drop me a message and tell me what they're thinking, what you're wanting. I'd be happy to consider it and have a chat about it. But also another thing, I absolutely love looking at the history of things, the history of a lot of things really, not just fashion, but with sewing. When I'm making a new outfit, making a new garment, if it's from a particular era or a particular type of garment, I just love to look up a bit about the history. And I was recently looking at the history of pajamas and found it very, very interesting, some of the information I came across, and I'll share some of that with you in this video because why not? Something to chat about. Yeah, over a cup of tea we need to chat. So one of the things I was really sort of fascinated to read about, gosh, and I've made a mistake, so this is why you shouldn't really talk and sew at the same time. But it means I can unpick and you don't have to listen to me over the machine. It's only a little bit I've done wrong. Just didn't check that that was flat before I went over that area. The history of pajamas dates back to the Middle Ages already, where they wore big loose-fitting garments at night and the evenings for leisure wear. And pajamas, I've now discovered, are not only for sleeping in, they're for leisure wear, for comfort. People use them for different things. I've even discovered there was a time when they were used for beach wear, which I found extremely interesting and fascinating. Not the sort of thing you see on the beach nowadays. Well, not any of the beaches I've been to anyway. So yeah, I thought I'd share with you a little bit about what I've learned about the history of pajamas, where they come from, a few of the interesting facts. I won't bore you with 100 details, just a few of the little facts about them, while I show you bits and pieces about the actual the sewing of the pyjamas themselves. I don't think that you will hear me over the overlocker, so I'm just going to quickly overlock the seam now that I've fixed it and check that it's all correct, and I'll be right back with you. Right, all overlocked. I can now remove the pins from the top bits here of the pockets, because those will stay in place because they've been stitched down now. So the history of pyjamas, getting back to that while I've not got the machine running. So like I said, can be dated back all the way to the Middle Ages, which is a very long time ago, but really they sort of came to more into the forefront of being in the 1800s and 1900s, where England, Britain was in India, in some of these Asian countries, and picked up what they were doing. It picked up sort of things from those areas, those places, and brought them back to the country. And they were used as leisure garments. They were very much mostly focused on men using them in those days, and yeah, it wasn't until the sort of 20th century that it became more of a thing for women, and there's a little story behind that and how it became more an outfit and a garment for women to use and wear. Gosh, it's amazing how these seem to be different knits. Not sure what happened when I cut these out. I think I didn't use my adapted pattern when I was cutting the back part out. Never mind, it's easily fixable. So just going to make sure I pin these so I get them in the right place. So what I'm going to be doing now is sewing down the side seams next to get the pants together. So I'm just going to pin them in place so I know that I've got them all correct and straight before I stitch and have to unpick again. So getting back to the history. So in the 1920s, we all know that sort of 1920s, 30s, 40s, there was a lot of work going on, a lot of stuff going on in the background with the design houses, especially in the French design houses, Dior, etc. Coco Chanel, well-known name I'm sure to a lot of people, Chanel No. 5, and you know, Chanel various items of fashion, bags, coats, etc. So she was quite revolutionary when it came to pyjamas. She really went all out with the idea of pyjamas as a garment for women. She started using more softer flowing fabrics, sort of knit fabrics, silk fabrics, played around and worked on more tailored sort of tailored to the female bodies and shape sort of garments that women would enjoy. And she developed something which I found really interesting, as I was already saying a bit earlier, of the beach wear. So if you didn't want to wear your swimwear to the beach, or maybe it was a bit too cold to on that day, and you still wanted to join your friends there, you could wear your pyjamas, your beach pyjamas, or your beach wear. And I've actually, I had a little search and had a little look at these on Google. I did a search of pictures of these beach pyjamas, and they were actually quite, you could see why they were trendy, why they were liked. They were quite interesting, quite fascinating garments. Some people teamed them up with all sorts of other garments as well, and some people had quite a lot of layers on, quite a lot of clothes they were wearing to the beach, which was interesting, considering it was beach wear. Not really the sort of thing you'd see nowadays. I'm trying to sort of picture and imagine someone on the beach at Tenerife in beach pyjamas. Not really what you'd imagine. So yeah, the pajamas went through a lot of changes, a lot of different sort of revolutionized eras and steps depending on what time it was. All through this, men continue to have pajamas, and the style of those changed as well over time, and had various forms over time. And during the sort of 1920s to 1960s, there was a lot of change, a lot of various types of pajamas that were seen, mostly because of the different revolutionary things, the advent of various new types of fabrics, the different ways of being able to manufacture and then mass produce clothes. Mass producing clothes really changed so much in fashion and so many different things, including in pajamas, and made it much more accessible to a much wider range of the public, of people who were able to use them. So, and as we know nowadays, we just think back to Christmas time, nowadays you get the whole family, you can get matching Christmas pajamas for the whole family and those kinds of things. You go into any clothes store and there's a whole section on nightwear, and pajamas always feature prominently in those areas. Now, it seems quite strange then, why would I want to hand make pajamas? Well, I do find they last longer, but the main thing is you can choose your fabric. You can choose the fabric, the colours you want, and you can change the design to how you want. My daughter likes the very sort of loose, classic style of pajamas with the collar, the collar that has the V neck coming down, 2 buttons, the quite loose pants with elasticated waist, the pockets to pop your hands into. Big, like I said, you don't always wear them only to bed, you wear them at other times as well. So there's all sorts of reasons to have handmade pajamas. One of the main ones though would be that they would last better, they would last longer, and they would be easier to fix. So if they became a little bit broken, if they got a little hole in them, if a seam came undone, anything like that happened, they would be a lot easier to fix than your store-bought, mass-produced ones. So that's just a very brief history. There's a lot more information that I came across, a lot more detail that I came across. I'm not going to go into all that now because it can get quite boring when you go into a lot of detail with these things. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly run up the side seams and then the center seam of these pajamas and overlock them, and then I'll be back with you to show you trimming off the leg so that it's all the same length. It's all gone a little bit wrong, yeah, and I think it's when I was cutting it out I didn't use my adapted pattern piece, and putting the cuff on with the piping in case there's anyone out there who's interested in knowing how to put piping on. It's not going to be a full-on lesson, just a brief overview showing you how I do it. I will see you soon. Right, I am back with my seams sewn. So what I want to do is to ensure that the legs are nice and straight along the bottom, is make sure to put the sides together and match everything up nicely. So when I do my trimming, I definitely used the wrong pattern piece when I was cutting these, because you can see the difference there, and I had fixed it up on the pattern. One piece was one I was busy adapting and the other one was the one I had finished adapting, and I think I picked up the wrong one. I'll need to check and make sure I throw out the wrong one before I do that again in the future. But it's easily enough fixed. Just make sure everything's lying nice and straight and evenly. And I'm going to do them both at the same time to make sure that they're matching when I'm done, when I'm finished. So you don't want one leg longer than the other. So the shortest part is there, and I want to make sure that it's straight. So that bit there is even a bit too long. Just going to get it straight across here, and hopefully, really, if you're not very experienced with this and you're trying to do it yourself at home, you're actually making the pyjamas, doing the sewing yourself, you might want to measure it out. But I've done this a lot of times before, and I can usually get it matched up very well. Just didn't get quite in the right place that time. In this case, if you make a mistake, pyjama pants can either be extra long or 3/4 or short, so you've got a bit of room for error there, just in case. I've just nicked this a bit in the wrong place, and just straighten that off. Okay. So, like I was saying earlier, I'm going to just talk very briefly about attaching piping. So just get these turned around to the right side. And you can see you've got the lovely pockets, which those have come out perfectly right. You've got the band that is going to be shorter like that when the elastic is in place, and we just want to pop the cuffs on now. And I prepared these cuffs before, when I started sewing this before. I'm doing my own, making my own cording using satin bias binding and cord, and I'd only wanted a very thin cording, so you can see it's going to be quite narrow, the cording. I should say narrow, not thin. You can see it's going to be pretty narrow, the cording there, but it looks really good on the pyjamas, just having that fine narrow cording just to finish things off. And I've just realized that the last time I did this, I actually did it before sewing the leg together completely, but it will still work this way. I'm not undoing all that because I've overlocked it as well. And just measure and make sure that they fit. What I'm going to do then is what I'm going to do basically is just sew the seams here together, and then I can attach the cuff and the cording in one, holding it around like that. And all I'm going to do, I've attached the cording where I want it, then I'm going to put these together the other way around, otherwise the cording won't show. So you do cording down onto the right side of the pant leg, so that when it is sewn into place, you will have the cording showing there. I don't know how well you can see that, or how well it's showing what I'm trying to show you, but let me get on and do that, and I will show you the finished effect when I've done it. See you soon. So, trying to put the cuffs on with the way the legs were already sewn up was not going to work and look neat. So what I've had to do is on the inside leg seam, I've just undone a bit of the seam on each side. So you don't have to go very far down. This is what I'm talking about when I spoke about how it's easy to fix things in one of my previous videos. Well, in my initial video, my introductory one. And what I'm going to do now is just pin the cuff into place, sew it on, redo the seam on the side, because then it'll be nice and neat with the cuff and the leg all in one, nice and neatly done. And then I will show you the finished product ready to put the elastic in. Now that I've got the cuffs on all nice and neatly, and you can see how the binding has gone on really nicely there, the cording. I have got everything together on the pants, ready for the elastic to go in. So I have measured off a piece of elastic, which is to my daughter's waist measurement. Taking off, of course, allowing for the stretch of the elastic, you need to take off a little bit to allow for that, so that it's not too big. And my favourite way of inserting elastic is to join it together and put it in that way, because then I can make sure that it's lying flat and I can make sure that I get it where I want it, placed correctly with the correct seam. And also I can check and make sure that the elastic is going to hold where I've stitched it together. I've seen some videos recently on tips for sewing elastic together, where people use a piece of fabric to join the two ends of the elastic together. What I found is generally, if you measure the elastic out, the amount of elastic you need for joining together is only about that much, so maybe an inch. And usually by getting rid of that inch, you actually get the elastic to fit better on the person. So you benefit from actually doing it this way. And I'll show you in a second what I've been doing. Sew it together is sewing, get that out there, sewing in a square around with a cross in the middle, and that holds the elastic together really well. And I know for a fact it lasts, because I once made a skirt which with an elastic join like this, and after 5 years it was still perfectly fine. Even though the elastic was starting to wear out, the join was perfectly fine. So I'm going to get the elastic into the pants, and then we can start working on the top, which is slightly more work with a little bit more cording involved, but I'll show you bits and pieces as I go along. See you soon. Okay, so the pants are done. Hang them up here behind me so you can see part of them. I'll find a way of showing you the full thing at the end. Unfortunately, my daughter's not here yet to try them on. I'm not sure she'll want me to film her with them on anyway. So let's have a look at the top. Just remind myself. So I've got sleeve cuffs, which will need cording. We have the sleeves, to which the cuffs will need to be attached. I'll just keep those together. We have the facing for the front, which will need the cording to attach the cording down the front of the pajamas. The collar. Now, some people put interfacing into the collar, and generally if I was making a blouse or a shirt, I would put interfacing into the collar as well. But because it's a pyjamas, I quite like to keep the collar nice and soft, because who wants a stiff collar sticking into their neck during the night while you're sleeping? So I don't put interfacing into there. Now, what I do need to do is put piping on that. So I've got piping to do on the sleeve, the collar and the facing. I've cut because I had enough material, I've cut a little pocket out here, which would ideally, you'd want a bit of piping in this. So you'd have the pocket with a little top bit with a bit of piping along there. But I'm just worried I'm going to start running out of the binding. So I'm going to do the cuffs first, and the collar and the facings, and then if I've got enough binding left for the pocket, then I'll do the pocket and add the pocket on. So first of all, I think I will start with the collar, and the collar is the part that's probably the trickiest because it's got the two curved sides around. Now, when I talked earlier about having the piping already prepared on the cuffs for the legs, what I was talking about is before I sew it all together, I don't try and put the piping in, especially because I'm making, but probably even if I had bought piping, but especially because I'm making my own piping using bias binding and cording. So basically you've got the cord wrapped inside the bias binding to make your piping, and it's because I wanted a satin piping, and I couldn't find satin cording in cording in white satin, so I thought I'd just make my own. It's also cheaper to make your own if you are doing the sewing yourself. So when I talk about preparing it, you sew it onto one side first of the whatever you're putting the piping on, and where you want, because I'm using this which is narrower than what the seam is going to be, I sew it on with leaving enough seam allowance, and especially doing corners and things, get yourself around the corners, doing it with a tacking size stitch. And the other thing I find is when you're making your own cording, this pulls out very easily. So you sew it all nicely in place, cut it off, and then the cord starts pulling out and you can't get it back in again. So I can sew across the end here to stop, across the end there to stop that from happening, which keeps it much neater as well and makes it easier to work with when I'm sewing everything together. So what I'm going to do first is just get the piping onto, I think I'm going to get all the piping on, get the piping onto the collar, the facings and the sleeve cuffs. Then I'll know straight away whether I've got enough for the pocket, and then I'll come back to you and show you all the piping in place and talk through putting the pyjama top together. See you soon. I've put all my cordings on now. I had enough for my cute little pocket, so just need to remember to actually put that onto the pyjama top when I do it. So I've put those together. I've actually sewn the whole collar together, and with the piping in place there, ready to go onto the pyjamas. I've put the sleeves, the cuffs onto the sleeves at least, not the sleeves onto the cuffs, with the piping on. So those are ready to go. So all I've got left to do with this part of it is I've got the cording ready on the facings, and I need to attach those to the front of the pajama pieces. So just going to point out another couple of things with the piping in case anybody watching actually is sewing themselves and wanting some tips. So a zipper foot is needed for putting the piping on more easily. It is a lot easier because you don't have the whole wide part of the foot, you've just got this little bit which holds the binding down, and you can get really nice and close to the actual cording, which is what you need to get a nice neat cording. So the stitching is right next to the cording, there's very little space. And what you do is you do the initial prep work of attaching the cording to the stitching, to the one side of the item, and when you're putting it on the other side, so when I'm attaching the facing now onto the top pieces, what I'm wanting to do is make sure that the side I'm sewing on is the side that's showing the seam there, because then I can just follow that seam line and see exactly where that stitching is, so I can sew on top of that stitching, which makes my life much easier to get it to have a nice neat finish like that, with a nice even piping with no trouble, no unpicking. And I tried various different ways when I first started doing piping. This way works the best, it's the quickest. It might be double sewing, but it's much easier to see what you're doing when you're doing it on one piece and then be following the seams, especially when you're doing things like corners, going around corners, because it's quite hard to keep a hold on the piping, a hold on everything. With the satin it's quite slippery, but this will come out. I can easily pop this on you now. Once I've stitched it, I can do my clipping of my curves, and when I turn it around, I'll have a nice, neat, flat line piping. So I'm going to get the facings into place on the tops, and once I've done that, I'll be able to start putting the main pieces together, usually shoulder seams first. Once those are done, you can attach collars, sleeves, and then you do the side seams and the hemming, and so it doesn't take very long once you get past all this part. The piping is all the fiddly bits, getting all the little bits on. And I mustn't forget to put my pocket on to the top left hand side. I think it's the left hand side it goes on, pretty sure it is. And usually for lining up, to be able to line up so you've got your pocket in the right place, you line up the top of the pocket with the bottom of the armhole, and then it sits in a really nice place, usually on the top. It does depend on how long the top is, what type of top, what type of pocket, but with this type of pocket on a pajama top, that would be a good way to place it, a good way to judge where to put it. If you haven't got markings from your pattern, you've forgotten to mark it off, or didn't bother to mark it like me, because I didn't know if I was whether I was putting it on or not, and I have some experience of attaching them. So I'm going to go ahead and get some more bits done, and then I will show you when I get a bit further along the way. See. The pajama top is really coming together now. I have finished off with overlock facings. They're in place on the top, pocket sewn on. Next step, going to pin the collar on, get that sewn in, the sleeves in, and then we're nearly done. So I've got all the bits of the pajama top together now, and you can see how nicely that's all come together. Popped it onto Dolly just to see how it hangs rather than the fit. I'm thinking, oh, and you can see the pocket came out really well, in the right place. I'm thinking, well, I've still got to do the hem down at the bottom and then the buttons, and I'm thinking sort of blue buttons might look really good on here, but I'm going to have to go through the buttons I've got and see what looks right and goes well. The pants, I could not find somewhere to put it to show it well, but there they are in all their finished glory. So those are done. I'm going to have to think about a way to display this to show you properly when it's all completely done. Not long now, and it'll be ready. And the pyjamas are now finished, all finished off. Got the buttons attached, everything sewn together. I'm very pleased with the end result, and I know my daughter is going to be very pleased when she gets here later this week to finally have her cute pair of pyjamas. Don't know if I'll be able to get the whole thing in. I'll try. Just about the whole pyjamas. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. See you soon.